Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the ninth Florida Keys Mosquito Control District Oxitec Public Educational Webinar. Our topic this evening is What's in the Box? How Oxytec's Just Add Water technology helps control the Aedes aegypti population. Our speakers are Andrea Leal, Executive Director of the FKMCD. I'm Meredith Fensom, Oxytec's Head of Public Affairs and a Florida native. Nathan Rose is Oxytec's Head of Regulatory Affairs, and he's with us too. So we are hosting this series of webinars to share information with residents of the Florida Keys and provide forums to answer questions. All webinars are open to everyone. All webinars are recorded and made available for everyone after the event. We'll answer all questions relating to tonight's topic. We may group similar questions together. Any off-topic questions will be answered after the event. If time runs out, we'll accept questions in writing via florida@oxytec.com. And questions and answers will be published in writing after the event with links to external resources. We'd also like to draw your attention to our upcoming webinars. In January, we will host Preparing for the FKMCD Oxytec Pilot Project, Overview of Field Trial Design and Management. In February, we will have a roundtable discussion about controlling the Aedes aegypti, which is the vector of dengue, Zika, heartworm, and other diseases. And then in March, we'll take a look at community partnerships and the role that communities play in our pilot project. So our agenda for this webinar, first we'll look at the Aedes aegypti population in Florida. We'll take a look at our box and talk about what is it and the deployment of our mosquitoes in Florida. We'll also talk about what's not in the box, and then we'll take your questions and answer them. Andrea, over to you.
Thanks, Meredith. I think we like to start these webinars really just kind of talking about why the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District is even looking into any of these novel technologies. So as you all may know, we have had some challenges in the last decade, especially with the introduction of dengue fever in our local mosquito population. In 2009 and 2010, we saw just under 100 cases of locally acquired dengue fever in Key West. Unfortunately, we saw a very similar issue last year, or I should say this year. It's not the new year yet. I think we're all fast forwarding to 2021. But this year we've seen 67 locally acquired cases of dengue in Key Largo. And that is still ongoing. We're still having folks in the Upper Keys being tested for potential, and we're hoping that we're in the clear. But it really just goes to show you that, you know, we do have the mosquito numbers that can cause these types of issues. And that's really why the district has been looking at this technology since 2010 and any other technologies that are out there that can help us. One of the great things about looking at the Oxytec technology is that it is very specific. It only affects the Aedes aegypti mosquito, and that's the mosquito that causes these diseases. So no harmful impacts on the environment that you may see with broad-scale insecticides, no other effects on other mosquito species or any of those other species that may feed upon mosquitoes. Next slide, please. So again, we're really focusing on Aedes aegypti. Aedes aegypti first is not native to Florida or the Americas. It came across a couple hundred years ago, most likely during the slave trade. However, what it did is when it brought across it's also brought all of these diseases, yellow fever outbreaks, dengue outbreaks. We saw Zika in Miami-Dade in 2016. So the spread of this mosquito has really moved these diseases across the entire world. And that's why we really are focusing in on the Aedes aegypti. With that, I think I will turn it over to Nathan.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. So what I'd like to do is first just talk about the Oxytec Mosquito that will be released in Florida during this project and how it works. And then after that, I will spend a little bit of time talking about how we'll actually be releasing these mosquitoes into the environment in Florida, looking at the box we'll be using to deploy those and how that actually works. So what we've done at Oxytec is we've developed a version of Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, which have 2 genes that have been added into these mosquitoes. And what these genes do is they basically, when we release male mosquitoes into the wild, they will pass on these genes to all of their offspring, and all of their female offspring that inherit these genes will die. And that's because the offspring inherit what we call a self-limiting gene, and that gene only affects the female offspring that actually inherit it. So this allows us to have, as Andrea said, completely targeted suppression just of this one species, because it relies on male Aedes aegypti mosquitoes being released and going out to mate with wild female Aedes aegypti. They don't mate with any other species, so they can't pass on these genes to any other species. So it's entirely targeted just to this one species, which is transmitting diseases. So these 2 genes that we've put into the mosquito are safe, they're non-toxic, they're non-allergenic. They've been widely used in biology for many, many years, and they have proven effectiveness. So we have, as I'll talk about in some of the coming slides, about a decade of using these genes in this mosquito to actually be able to control the wild populations of Aedes aegypti in multiple different countries worldwide. We release only male mosquitoes, and male mosquitoes do not bite. They don't have the mouth parts to do so. And the other thing about the mosquitoes that we release is they contain this self-limiting gene, which causes the female offspring to die. But they also contain a second gene, which is a fluorescent marker gene, and that allows them to be fully traceable in the field. So we can tell if a mosquito that we find in the field during this project is one of the ones that we've released, or whether it's a wild one, because all of the ones that we've released have this fluorescent marker, which is visible at all the different life stages of the mosquito. And finally, the mosquitoes that we release are fully self-limiting in the environment. And what that means is that after a few generations after we stop releasing mosquitoes, the genes, the 2 genes here, the self-limiting gene and the fluorescent gene, will be completely gone from the environment. And that's been demonstrated in the field multiple times as well. So Oxytec as a company has about a decade of experience deploying these self-limiting mosquitoes in multiple parts of the world. And this started back in 2009, 2010 in the Cayman Islands and in Brazil in multiple different small-scale field projects there. We also deployed our first generation of Aedes aegypti mosquito called OX513A in Brazil in much larger scale. So we had a successful program protecting a city of about 65,000 people, a city called Piracicaba in São Paulo state in Brazil. And that was very successful in actually controlling the wild Aedes aegypti population. In 2018, Oxytec moved to the second generation mosquito, which we call OX5034, and that's what we'll be deploying in Florida during this particular project. And that's been trialed for 2 years in Brazil, firstly releasing adult mosquitoes, and then last year, a very successful trial in Brazil where we used release boxes like I'll be talking about tonight to actually produce these male mosquitoes in the field and allow them to release themselves into the wild to go out and find the wild females and mate with them. In total, over these 10 years of releases, we've produced over 1 billion male Oxytec mosquitoes for release. We have peak suppression of over 90% in most of these trials where we've actually released these mosquitoes. And there have been absolutely no adverse effects on humans, animals, or the environment. This technology has been demonstrated time and time again to be completely safe and to be effective. And just moving on to talk a little bit about the trial of this particular second generation mosquito in Brazil. So last season, that was 2019 to 2020 mosquito season in a city called Indaiatuba. also in São Paulo state in Brazil, we released the second generation mosquito using these mosquito release boxes. And within about 6 weeks, we started to see very effective suppression of the wild mosquito population. And in 14 weeks, we had over 90% suppression of the wild Aedes aegypti population by releasing male mosquitoes from these mosquito release boxes. The mosquito was fully self-limiting. There was no persistence in the wild after we stopped this trial. And we also had very high public acceptance in the neighborhoods where we were releasing these mosquitoes. It was safe, it was effective, and it was helping to protect the public in Brazil from endemic diseases like dengue, which is a major problem there. And so we're very confident as we move forward into this project in Florida that this mosquito is effective and that it's safe. And this has been demonstrated in other countries, but as we look at the US, it's also been confirmed by federal and state regulatory approvals of this mosquito ahead of this particular project. So why did we develop the second generation mosquito? We wanted a tool which is going to be highly effective at reducing the Aedes aegypti population, which transmits disease. We wanted a tool which is species specific, not harming native mosquitoes, not harming other native insects or other animals which are present in the ecosystem locally. We wanted a tool which was safe and non-toxic, which would not have any female mosquitoes being released and would not impact on the rest of the ecosystem. And finally, we also wanted a tool that could be integrated with other types of vector management that are important in being able to control multiple different mosquito species. And the OX5034 mosquito can do just that. And finally, we wanted a tool which will be cost effective and something that's easy to deploy and scalable as well. So briefly, just to talk about how the mosquito was developed, we talked about this in some of our previous webinars, and I'd urge you to take a look at those, particularly the video of our labs, which we released about a month ago, and that's available on our YouTube channel and on our website. And that'll give you a much greater insight into how these mosquitoes are produced in the Oxytec facilities. So what we did is we introduced just these two genes into the Aedes aegypti mosquito, the male selecting self-limiting gene, which produces a protein called TTAV, and then the fluorescent marker gene, which produces a protein called DS-RED2. So the self-limiting gene ensures that any female which inherits this gene cannot survive. But male mosquitoes which have this gene are unaffected by it. What that means is that we can produce male-only batches of mosquitoes in production by basically rearing these mosquitoes. All of the females will die, all of the males will survive, and will be able to carry on to adulthood and go and mate. And that's enabled us to produce these egg release devices, these mosquito boxes. Basically what we can do is we can take eggs of the mosquitoes that carry these genes, we can put them into the water, we can add diet, and as those mosquitoes develop, all of the females will die, and the males will survive to adulthood to be able to pass on that gene to their offspring. What this also means is that the males that carry this gene out into the wild and mate with wild mosquito females will ensure that all of the female progeny of those matings cannot survive. And as it's the females that bite and transmit the diseases like dengue and Zika, this ensures that we actually are having an effect on the disease-transmitting population of Aedes aegypti. We don't release any 5034 females from these boxes because any females that carry these genes are not actually able to develop to adulthood. Secondly, we have the fluorescent marker gene, which is present in these mosquitoes. And this allows us to track the Oxytec mosquitoes after release, whether it's the adults or whether it's the larvae or the pupae. And you can see these in the pictures here. On the left-hand side, you have a mosquito larva, which carries the Oxytec genes, which is glowing bright orange-red. Next to those, you have a couple of mosquito pupae. And again, the one on the right-hand side carries the Oxytec gene and is very clearly distinguishable. And then the one on the right-hand side is an adult mosquito, which also has this gene. And so you can see that these are very, very clearly distinguishable from the wild mosquitoes that don't have these genes. The fluorescent marker gene is very widely used in biology. It has been for about 20 years, and it's non-toxic and non-allergenic. And it's visible under special filters when you look at these mosquitoes under a microscope. And the male mosquitoes that pass on the self-limiting gene, which ensures that their female offspring die, also pass on this fluorescent marker gene to all of their offspring, male and female. And that ensures that we can tell which mosquitoes have come from the ones that we release. Finally, a question that we often get: do Oxytec mosquitoes bite? And the answer is no. And this is because only female mosquitoes can bite. Only females actually have the mouth parts that are able to penetrate the skin to be able to take a blood meal that they need to then be able to lay eggs. Males don't have those mouth parts, and they actually feed on nectar for their food source. So we're only producing male mosquitoes and only releasing male mosquitoes into the environment, and therefore Oxytec mosquitoes cannot bite, and they are safe and non-toxic to humans and to animals. So before I talk about the box in a little bit more detail, just wanted to say that right now, as we're talking, we're actually expanding our OX5034 male mosquito releases in Brazil. So in Brazil right now, unfortunately, on top of dengue being a major problem, they are dealing with COVID at the same time. And so they're dealing with two major public health threats. And so in this city, which you can see here, which is the city of Indaiatuba, about an hour outside of Sao Paulo, we have expanded our mosquito releases. And the health secretary of that city just stated, and I've quoted it here, that they're really happy to have our friendly Aedes aegypti technology because it helps to protect that city from one of the two epidemics which they have present there, COVID and dengue. We have 2 years of track record of releasing these mosquitoes in Indaiatuba, working very closely with the local mosquito control authorities, the public health authorities, and they're really excited, as are we, to be able to expand this project further there. So on the right-hand side here, you can see one of our mosquito release boxes mounted on an electricity pole in the city of Indaiatuba, and we've now been mounting these in various different parts of the city over the last few weeks as the mosquito season starts in Brazil around about November, December, and they start to see an increase in dengue cases unless they're able to control these mosquitoes. This comes after Oxytec receiving full biosafety approval for this mosquito from Brazil's national biosafety regulator. So that happened earlier this year in May. And that's allowed us to be able to release these mosquitoes anywhere in the country in Brazil to be able to help to control these diseases. So what's in the box? I'm actually going to ask Andrea here just to hold up one of our Oxytec mosquito boxes so you can see how big it is, what it looks like, and then I'll talk about it a bit more. Great, thank you. So these are solid plastic boxes. They will be mounted on various pieces of, if it's on a fence or if it's on a pole or some kind of post, so that they're very firmly situated. And these boxes will basically have three things in them. They will have the OX5034 mosquito eggs, which we put into the box. They will have diet to help those developing mosquito larvae actually feed and be able to develop all the way through to adulthood. And they'll have water. So mosquito eggs will hatch once you put them into water. And then after they've been in there, they will hatch into very, very tiny larvae. And those larvae take about 7 or 8 days to go through 4 different development stages of larvae. And as they do that, they're eating a lot of diet. And once they've reached the final larval development stage, they will turn from larvae into pupae. And pupae will take about a day or two before they then start to turn from pupae into adult mosquitoes. And so about 10 days after we activate one of these boxes by putting the eggs in, putting the diet in, and adding water, we'll start to see these non-biting male mosquitoes start to emerge from the box. And if you look carefully, you can see on the very top of the box, there are a couple of little escape holes, which will allow those mosquitoes to start to escape from this box and make their way out to the environment. And the advantage of doing it like this is that it means we can make our mosquitoes in situ, in the field, where they're most needed. And the mosquitoes can develop at their own pace. They can basically come out of the box when they're ready at the right time of day. They can go and they can find the wild females that are out there in the field and mate with them. And then those wild females will go and find some kind of local water source. That might be some water that's in an old tire. It might be some water that's in an old flower pot. And they'll lay their eggs in there. And then all of the female offspring that come from those eggs will die. And the males that come from those eggs that carry these genes can then go and mate with another wild female and pass on those genes again. And so by doing this, after a few weeks, we'll start to see the wild mosquito population declining. And then hopefully after a couple of months, we'll have pretty good control of that wild mosquito population. So the male mosquitoes will go through all of these development stages from eggs to larvae to pupae to adults. Females won't. So the females that are in that box that come out of those eggs will die at very, very early larval stages because they're carrying that self-limiting gene, which kills them and stops them developing into adults. Also, just to note that all of the components of this box, so the diet that goes into there to feed the developing larvae, but obviously the mosquito eggs themselves, have been reviewed by the EPA and also by multiple Florida state regulatory authorities. And all of these components are safe for humans and for the environment. So we're really excited as this project gets going in 2021 that we will be starting to deploy these boxes into the field, putting the eggs, putting in the diet, adding water, and starting to see these mosquitoes actually being released into the wild. What's not in the box? So I've said that we have the eggs, we have the diet, and we have water added. We will not have any adult female mosquitoes coming out of these boxes. And that's because the self-limiting gene is completely effective in killing these females before they make it to adulthood. There will also not be any tetracycline in the box. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the slides that are coming up. And there's also no risk to humans, animals, or the environment from anything that's present in this box. And that has been confirmed by multiple regulators. A little bit of background, because we've definitely had some conversations with people, we've had some questions just asking us more about how we produce these mosquitoes, how do we get these eggs that are actually going to be put into these boxes. So this slide and the next slide will give a little bit more detail about that. So in the Oxytec facilities in the United Kingdom, we produce both male and female mosquitoes in our production facilities. And the reason we have to produce both is because we want them to mate with each other, and we want the females to produce the eggs, which will actually then be shipped to Florida and put into these boxes. And the way we do this is we can actually help the females to survive if we give them a very small amount of tetracycline when they're at that very early larval stage. So what we do is we take mosquito eggs from this 5034 strain, we add a small amount of tetracycline just at the early larval stages to help those females survive. And the total amount of tetracycline that will be used to produce all of the mosquito eggs for this whole project is actually less than about 5 grams. So that's about the equivalent of the amount of sugar in a packet of sugar. Once those female larvae have had some of that tetracycline that helps them to survive through to the pupal stage, then we get rid of all that tetracycline. The pupae are then reared in clean water. And then those pupae, once they turn into adults, the males and females will mate with each other. They will also not have any contact with tetracycline. Those females will then lay eggs, which are surface sterilized with sanitizer. And those eggs are then packaged and shipped to Florida. And in every stage of this process, we have very, very strict quality control, which has been dictated by the US regulatory authorities. And this quality control helps to make sure that in every batch of eggs, we have the self-limiting gene function, we have good male performance, and all of the other parameters that we need to have a successful release of these mosquitoes. Once those eggs have been produced in the UK, they are then packaged, they're shipped to the United States, where they arrive in Florida. And then what we do is we take these mosquito release boxes, we go into the field, and we put these eggs into the box, we add the water, we add the diet for the larvae. And then, as I've explained, after about 10 days, we'll have the male mosquitoes releasing themselves from those boxes. So there's no tetracycline in these boxes. There's actually no tetracycline used in this project in Florida at all. And we will only be releasing male adults from these boxes. And as I've said, these boxes will be fixed to solid objects in the environment where they'll be placed. They'll be placed in out-of-the-way areas so that the mosquitoes can emerge and take their time and get out into the wild and go and find females to mate with them. They'll also be serviced occasionally and replaced every few weeks as well. And then briefly, just to talk about what this project will look like in Florida. We've talked about this in more detail in some of our previous webinars. So if you are interested, I encourage you to take a look at those. And I think we'll also be talking about this more in our January webinar. But really, this project will have two major parts. The first part, Project A, will be looking at what happens when we put a single box in the environment, single point, and we basically want to see what happens to those male mosquitoes that come out. How far are they able to fly in the environment in Florida? How long do they live? How effective are they at mating in that local environment? And we will have those single point releases in 9 small areas, and we'll be releasing mosquitoes there for about 12 weeks. In the second part of the project, Project B, we will be releasing from multiple release points within small neighborhoods. So we'll have multiple boxes placed around a small neighborhood in up to 6 areas, and they will be releasing for about 16 weeks and really looking at the impact on the wild mosquito population as we do that. And those locations will be selected with FKMCD following pest monitoring and community engagement, which is already ongoing in the Keys. I know Meredith will talk about that a little bit more in some of the coming slides. And then in the middle here, if you look carefully, you can see a couple of the traps that we'll be using to actually monitor the mosquito population throughout this project. So the top one is what we call an overtrap, and it's a way of collecting mosquito eggs. And we can bring those eggs back into the lab and hatch them and analyze them for fluorescence. And in the bottom picture there, you can see is an adult trap. It's called a BG trap, and it's basically a way of collecting adult mosquitoes, luring them into a trap using some sort of lure or light or carbon dioxide to be able to attract adult mosquitoes and then analyze those afterwards as well. Okay, so I'm going to hand back to Meredith now just to talk about some of the recent community engagement that we've been doing in the Florida Keys.
Thank you, Nathan. We just wanted to give a little update about some of the recent engagements we've been doing in the Keys and with Florida Keys residents. With COVID, the majority of our engagement right now is virtual, but we're doing some in person also. I was in the Keys last week. But just to walk through some of this, we've set up a project website with FKMCD, keysmosquitoproject.com, and it provides all of the information about our project. You can register for our webinars there, and you can link to all of the different regulatory approvals that we've received, and really there's just a lot of information available. We also held a vote recently, so Florida Keys residents could choose their favorite designs for the mosquito boxes that will be used for the project. And we have the 2 winners up on the screen, and people could vote on their favorite boxes from our project website as well. I mean, you all know that we're having these public educational webinars. This is our 9th tonight, and we'll keep doing them at least through March. We have a virtual tour, and all of our past webinars are available on Oxytec's YouTube channel. They're available on the keysmosquitoproject.com site and also on oxytec.com/Florida. We had a meeting with our independent advisory board last week, and these are just some snapshots of the things that we've been doing. And if you're in the Keys, you're probably hearing about our project on the radio every day, and we're doing a lot of social media promotion as well. One of the questions that we've gotten, especially during the vote for your favorite box, was how can I request a box for my yard? And we did not have a mechanism for people to do that. But we were getting the question a lot, and we got some emails, people offering to volunteer for the project. So we decided to set up a formal way for people to request either a mosquito box or also a trap for their yard. Nathan talked about the mosquito traps that we use, and they are really critical to the success of the project too. We use them for monitoring before, during, and after. So we encourage people who are interested in supporting the project to also consider hosting a trap. But so on this Join the Project part of our website, you can request a box, you can request a trap, you can sign up for updates, or you can volunteer as a project ambassador. We just have to mention that if you request a box or a trap, you're not guaranteed to get one. It depends on where you live and whether our project comes to your neighborhood. And sites won't be announced until early in 2021, and then this project will not begin until this spring. We've been doing some of our door-to-door campaigns and surveys in both English and Spanish. That door hanger is probably a little bit too small to read, but it's in Spanish because we were getting some requests for Spanish language content too. And we have some Spanish language materials available on our website. We have also launched a speakers bureau, and we did this because, sort of like the box requests, people were reaching out to us and saying, hey, can I get you to speak, whether it's a Chamber of Commerce or a Rotary Club. And we have presented to some of those organizations, but we wanted to provide a way for anyone in the Keys to request a presentation with FKMCD and Oxytec for their community organization or even for schools. We can do educational presentations that are more geared towards children, and we're very happy to do that. But we just wanted to raise awareness about this website and about the various things that are available there for you to become involved in the project. So we'll go ahead and take questions now. We've gotten a lot of questions, but we welcome more. And, if you're interested in asking something, we're not identifying who is asking the question. You just write it in the chat box, and we can see all of the questions there. And we really do welcome your questions, but we will not identify who is asking them. We want you to feel very comfortable to ask anything at all, but it needs to relate to tonight's topic, please. We are having so many webinars about different topics, and then we also have the Speakers Bureau option if you want to explore maybe a topic that we're not covering in one of these webinars. But we'll go ahead and get started with the questions. And Andrea, this first question is for you. And the question is, what if someone steals or vandalizes a box that is in my yard?
Great question. The first thing you should do is definitely get a hold of us, give us a call. We'll come out, see what happened, and ensure that we can put another box where it belongs. But there are both state and federal statutes that will protect any of these. So, obviously, if this becomes a big issue, we will have to monitor very closely and, maybe even pursue criminal charges if necessary. But we'll make sure that wherever we're putting things there in protected areas, as Nathan said, they're going to be fixed. So they shouldn't be easily moved or tampered with. But again, first thing, just give us a call and we'll figure out the best way to go from there.
Thanks, Andrea. The next question will go to you, Nathan. And the question is, how often do FKMCD Oxytec technicians need to visit the boxes?
Okay, so good question. Like I was saying, once the box has been put there, it'll take probably about 10 days before we start to see adult mosquitoes coming out of that box. And then we'd expect them to continue to come out of that box for another 10 days. And so after about 3 weeks, we would expect that box to kind of have finished its production of mosquitoes. And then at that point, we would have someone come and replace the contents of that box, put in some new water, some new eggs, some new diet to be able to continue to release mosquitoes from that box. We might also put a couple of boxes in the same location where we put one out, and then a week later we add a second box so that we have a continuous stream of mosquitoes that are coming from that particular location throughout the course of the project. But each individual box will run for about 3 weeks, and then it'll stop producing mosquitoes at that point.
Thanks, Nathan. Okay, the next question is for you, Andrea. And the question is, where in the Keys will the boxes be placed? And then it continues, over time, will they be all over all islands?
So the initial project, we have not selected the site yet. That's something that we're currently working on, looking at both community support and the mosquito population levels. So right now, we do not know what site these projects will occur. And I mean, it all depends on how everything works. So depending upon how this project goes and what the EPA might ask for, if they want more information or further projects to occur, you could see it spreading in different areas of the Keys, but it really depends upon how these initial projects go, what our next steps would be.
Great, thanks, Andrea. The next question, Nathan, it's for you. And the question is, will the boxes be locked?
Okay, so the boxes will be fixed to, as I said, to solid surfaces, whether that's to a wall, whether that's to a fence or some kind of pole. And then the boxes themselves will also have a lock. So once we've added the eggs and the diet and the water, the boxes themselves will also be locked. And so we want to make sure really that those mosquitoes are left undisturbed so that they have the best chance that they have to be able to develop and release those male mosquitoes into the wild.
Great, thanks, Nathan. The next question is also for you, Nathan. And the question is, how many mosquitoes can be expected to fly from the box?
Okay, that's a good question. So we would expect, we've designed these boxes in such a way that we would have an average of about 1,000 male mosquitoes actually exiting these boxes as adults. And so we would obviously put in more eggs than that because we know that all the females will die at very early stages, but the number of male adults that come out will be on average about 1,000.
Thank you, Nathan. Andrea, the next question is for you. And the question is, what happens to the boxes if there is a hurricane?
So basically, just like all of our other traps that we may be using, if there are ever predictions of foul weather, major storms coming through, everything in the field is removed. So nothing is left in the field if any sort of inclement weather is approaching.
Thanks.
Just to add, we would then obviously make a note of that in terms of how that impacts our data collection. And then as soon as it's safe again, we would want to replace those boxes with fresh ones after that storm has passed through. And making sure that we continue to be able to get good data out of this project.
Thanks, Nathan and Andrea. The next question, Andrea, this question is for you. It's, how many months notice will the Mosquito Control Board give to communities ahead of any release?
Yep, so again, we're looking at hopefully having site selection completed in early 2021. So we would anticipate about an 8-week time frame prior to any releases once that announcement is made.
Thank you, Andrea. The next question, Nathan, is for you. And the question is, will the box smell?
That's a good question, and it's one we've definitely been asked before. No, there won't be any detectable odor from the outside. So as I've said, the box is closed, it's locked, and the only thing that should be coming out of there is male mosquitoes.
Great, thank you. And then the next question, I mean, I guess it could be answered by either of you, but and Nathan, I'll send it to you first. Will the Mosquito Control Board have ownership of the mosquito boxes, or will Oxytec?
Okay, it's a good question. So this is very much a collaborative project between Oxytec and the Mosquito Control Board. We're working together, our scientists are working with the scientists at FKMCD to be able to evaluate how well these mosquitoes work in the local environment. Oxytec will be providing the boxes. That's part of what we do as a company, is we produce these, and as I've said, we're already producing these and deploying them in the field in Brazil right now as we speak. So we'll be providing the same kind of boxes for the trial in Florida.
Thank you, Nathan. Anything to add, Andrea? Probably not.
I mean, as Nathan said, this is a very collaborative project. Both entities are going to be heavily involved, and Oxitec will be providing the boxes.
Great. Thank you both. Nathan, this next question is for you. And the question is, will it attract other mosquitoes or insects? And I think it is the box. Okay,
that's a good question as well. So we've designed these boxes in such a way that they will not do that. They have just the shape of the box, the way it's been designed, and also the length of time that it's actually out there will prevent it from becoming a breeding site for other mosquitoes or other insects. So it's only out there, as I said, for about 3 weeks, and that's not going to be long enough for this to become a breeding site for other mosquitoes. And this is also something that we have tested extensively in Brazil as well. And we haven't seen this be an issue in the field in Brazil at all.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. The next question is for you also, Nathan. And the question is, in other countries where this box has been used, has there been an issue with vandalism or theft? And if so, what were the consequences?
So, as I've said, we're using these boxes right now in Brazil. We've had a couple of boxes that have been opened to see what's inside by inquisitive members of the local community, but certainly with no malicious intent. And what we've done in that case is we've just replaced the contents of those boxes, and that project has been able to continue there. So definitely no issues there.
Thank you, Nathan. The next question is for you also, Nathan, and the question is, if my neighbor has one of these boxes, are there any effects for the surrounding area that I should be aware of?
So, as I've said, the mosquitoes which are released from this box are male mosquitoes only. So those are safe, they're non-biting. The only thing they're going to want to do is to find a female mosquito to mate with. And they're going to do their best to find those females. So once they're released from this box, they're going to fly out into that neighboring environment. They fly maybe 50, maybe 100 meters in their lifetime. If they're lucky, they find a female and they mate with her, and then they die. So they don't live for very long. And their main goal in life is really to make sure that they're able to mate. So there's definitely not going to be any impact on humans in the surrounding area, or on animals or any other aspect of the environment. It's really just the species-specific impact. And the other thing just to say is that this box, once it's been placed there, it gets left alone. So it'll sit there, as I said, for about 3 weeks. And during that time, it doesn't need any other interventions. Those mosquitoes will do their thing. They'll go through their normal developmental pathway to emerge as males. So there's no need for anyone to actually do anything to that box in that time. It's only at the end of that period where someone from the Oxitec and FKMCD project team will go and retrieve the contents of that box and replace it so that we can continue to release mosquitoes from that location. But as Meredith said, one thing we're definitely looking for is also people who would like to host traps on their properties around the locations of these boxes. So if your neighbor has a box, the chances are we'll be looking for someone to host a trap very close by so that we can actually see both the adult mosquitoes which come out of the box, but also any fluorescent offspring of those adult mosquitoes. So we'll be looking at those over traps to be able to detect where the female mosquitoes that have mated are males, where they've gone and laid their eggs, how far they've been able to fly, and that's really important as well. So if your neighbor's got a box, please put your name down to host a trap or a box. We'd really love to hear from you.
Thank you, Nathan. Andrea, the next question is for you, and the question is, how many boxes will be used in total?
So I believe the project is looking at using about 130 boxes in total over the 2 projects in that time frame. So the first project where it's single site releases, I think we're looking at 9. Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong. And then the majority of the boxes will be used for the second part of the project where we're looking at multiple release sites.
Yeah, that's correct. And then those boxes will be fixed in place, and then every few weeks we'll be replacing the contents of those boxes with a new batch of eggs and diet and water so that we can continue to release mosquitoes from those boxes.
Thank you both. Nathan, the next question is for you, and the question is, how long does one box last?
Okay, so about 21 days. So that's based on how long these mosquitoes take to actually develop. So if we add the eggs and the diet and the water on day 1, after about 10 days, and that'll depend a little bit on the weather. If it's really hot, it'll be a bit quicker. If it's really cool, it might take a little bit longer. So after about 10 days, we'll start to see the first males emerging, and then they will take their time over the next 10 days or so before all of them have actually come out of that box. So after about 3 weeks, that box will be done, and then we will replace the contents again.
Great, thank you, Nathan. The next question is for you too. Okay, it says, well, it's a grouped question from more than one person. Please, could you explain, so this is, several people have asked this. Please, could you explain the quality control sampling that checks that there is no female production?
Okay, that's a good question. So what we do is, with every batch of eggs that we're producing in the UK, we are doing quality control. We're actually taking those eggs, we're actually hatching them and checking to make sure that we're not getting any females produced from those eggs. We're basically checking that those genes are working as designed every single time, generation after generation. And this is a process which has been reviewed in a lot of detail by the EPA and also by the Florida state regulators to make sure that the quality control process, that the sample sizes, that the frequency of sampling, all of those things are appropriate to make sure that we have exactly what we say on the outside of the box, that we're not having any females being released. So what we're doing is we're looking at the continued function of these genes to make sure that we have 0 females able to survive. And then the other thing we're doing with quality control is we're also making sure that we still have good performance of the male mosquitoes as well. So we'll be checking that the boxes are producing good quality male mosquitoes throughout the project as well. So there are multiple different aspects of the quality control, but that's something that's really core to our process. It's something that's very tightly controlled by the regulators. And it's also something that we implement all the time, every day in Brazil in our operations there.
Thank you, Nathan. Okay, the next question is for you too. Do you have data from Brazil that shows how well this works?
Yes, we do. So we have done 2 seasons of these mosquito releases in Brazil. The first season, or both of them were in the same place in a city called Indaiatuba. But in the first season, where we were just testing first the mosquito strain, we produced adult male mosquitoes in the lab, and we took those out and we released them. And they were very effective at suppressing the wild mosquito population. And then the next season, what we did is we actually trialed these boxes for the first time. And we did this in multiple different neighborhoods of about 1,000 people each. And in each of these neighborhoods, we had very effective control of the wild mosquito population. So over 90% suppression of the wild Aedes aegypti mosquito population after about 12 to 14 weeks of releasing these mosquitoes. And that project was done in collaboration with the local public health and mosquito control authorities in that city of Indaiatuba. And that's the city now where we've actually scaled up this project because it was effective the first time around on a small scale, and we've now scaled this up to a much larger part of that city in this current season. So yes, we definitely do have the data, and that data will be published fairly shortly in a peer-reviewed journal as well.
Thank you, Nathan. Andrea, this next question is for you. The question is, will somebody come get them once you are done? I think we're talking about the boxes.
Yes, once the project is done, we'll collect all of the boxes, we'll collect any remaining traps once our monitoring portion is over as well. So at the end, once everything is said and done, everything will be collected from the field.
Great, thank you, Andrea. Nathan, this next question is for you. And the question is, how will we know when the box is finished?
Okay, so the life cycle of the mosquito is such that it will, we know roughly how long it takes to develop through to adulthood. And as I've explained, it takes about 10 days for the first ones to start emerging, and then another 10 days before they're all done. And so based on that, we've actually set up just a routine servicing of these boxes. So we'll be coming around once every 3 weeks for a particular box to service it. And that's based on the experience that we have of actually deploying these in other places. So what we'll do is once we know the locations, we will work together with the hosts of these boxes to make sure that we have a schedule that works for them as well, that we can come and that we can actually service these boxes at the appropriate time.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. The next question, Andrea, I'll send this one to you. The question is, are there any restrictions to the maximum amount of wind tolerated by this test?
So not to my knowledge in the EUP, I think that it just basically designated named storms as reason to collect the boxes or the traps from the field. But no, I don't believe there's an actual wind restriction number that is in the experimental use permit.
Yeah, that's right. So it's really just about following, as Andrea was saying earlier, the same procedures that mosquito control will be doing anyway if we have a major storm, making sure that we're bringing in any traps. We don't want anything left out there in the case of a big storm. And then as soon as that's over, we want to replace that again.
Thank you both. And I am so sorry, someone is buzzing my front door. The next question, Nathan, is for you. And the question is, in the case of an accidental female release, what would happen?
Okay, so that's a good question. So one of the conditions of the permit, which you can look at, if you go to that keysmosquitoproject.com website, there are links there to all of the permit documents from EPA. One of the conditions is that if we have an accidental female release, we have to inform the EPA within 24 hours and we have to stop releases. And then we also have to spray with insecticide in the location where that female was found. So that is definitely something which we take seriously and which we would do in that event. So it's very clearly stipulated by the regulators.
Thank you, Nathan. The next question is for you also. And the question is, what if I live nearby and I have an adverse reaction to a mosquito bite? Can I blame Oxytec? What should I do?
Okay. So as I've said in this presentation, we're not going to be releasing any female mosquitoes. The quality control that we have in place will ensure that the self-limiting gene is completely effective in this particular mosquito strain. And so we have male-only production. So we will not be releasing any female mosquitoes, which are the ones that can actually bite people. So if you have a mosquito bite, it won't have come from an Oxytec mosquito. It will have come from a wild mosquito. And wild mosquitoes, whether they're Aedes aegypti, whether they're one of the other much more common species in the Keys, I think it's the salt marsh mosquito, which is present there. Andrea can correct me. Some people will have more of a reaction to those than others. But that's going to depend on what that mosquito species is.
Thank you.
Andrea, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that's the biggest caveat is that we're not going to be seeing female mosquitoes released out of these boxes. But again, it will only affect Aedes aegypti mosquitoes. Therefore, all of those other species that are found throughout the Keys are not going to be affected. And that's why, we're going to continue doing our normal mosquito control operations for all of those mosquito species.
Thank you both. Nathan, the next question is for you. How long will the mosquitoes live?
So the male mosquitoes which are released from these boxes will live just a few days. And it'll depend how long they hang around inside the box before they actually come out. Some of them can be a bit shy. But once they're out, they'll typically live for just a few days. They'll do their best to find a female and mate, and then they'll die. And that's typical for Aedes aegypti males. The ones that we produce are going to be very similar to wild Aedes aegypti males, which will have a similar lifespan. And that's something that we've confirmed in the field, again, in multiple trials. What we do is we typically compare the lifespan of the males we release with the wild ones. Once we stop releasing mosquitoes, there will still be some of those mosquito offspring which are present in the wild, which will still have a single copy of our genes. And those can persist sometimes for a few generations until they disappear from the wild. So we might still have some fluorescent Oxytec mosquitoes present for a few weeks or even a few months after the project stops. And that's entirely expected. And it's because we are able to have males carrying these genes surviving and passing them on to their own male offspring, which can then pass them on again. But what we do know is that after just a few months, the number of those will disappear and it will dwindle to zero, and then they'll be gone from the wild. And once we stop releases in this particular project, we will be monitoring all of the release environments until we see the complete disappearance of these genes from the wild mosquitoes. And that's something, again, that EPA is definitely keeping an eye on. Florida state authorities are keeping an eye on to make sure we have the complete disappearance of these mosquito genes from the wild.
Thank you, Nathan. Okay, the next question is I'll send this to you, Andrea. The question is, can I refuse a box even if my area is selected?
Yes. So we are not looking at putting these boxes on people's property that are not interested in participating. So if your area is selected, if your neighborhood is selected and you do not want to have one of these on your property, we will not be forcing anyone to have these on their property.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, the next question, Nathan, it's for you. We just have two more questions. This question is, the EPA approval states the release process must follow specific and stringent procedures. Who or what will be providing the in the field oversight to ensure compliance?
Okay, so part of the application process here for EPA was a very strict field protocol with all of the details of how these experiments will be conducted, the efficacy measures that will actually be assessed, the way that the data will be collected. And then also part of the EPA approval process was the agencies looking at all of the different operating procedures that are involved in this whole project, whether that's manufacturing, whether that's producing these boxes, whether that's how they're monitored in the field, how we analyze them in the lab, etc. So all of those processes have been scrutinized by the EPA and also by the state regulators. And Oxytec, as part of this project oversight, has to provide evidence that we've actually been following all of those particular protocols and procedures. So that means that any of the data is something that EPA can ask to look at. So that could be release records, that could be trap records, that could be data from release dates, wild mosquito numbers, any of those kind of things. It can also be the quality control records that I've talked about. It can be the details of production. Every single part of this process is open to scrutiny by EPA and by state regulators, who can all inspect this process at any time that they choose. And so it's a really important part of this project to make sure that we are in full compliance with all of the permit conditions that have been stipulated. So that's something we take very seriously. We have extensive staff training, which goes into making sure that we're actually able to comply with all of the permit conditions throughout this project, so that we are able to generate good data, which the regulators can rely on as they then look towards actually allowing a commercial registration of this mosquito.
Thank you, Nathan.
Meredith, can I jump in too? Just again, our employees, our scientific staff are going to be involved in every step along the way as well. So we will be there ensuring that things are occurring the way that they need to be. And I know that historically, when we've at Mosquito Control had other experimental use permit projects occurring, we did have multiple times where the regulatory agencies would come and visit, observe what's going on. So I would anticipate something similar for this project as well.
Great, thank you both. This next question is our last one, and Nathan, if you could start, I'll ask Andrea to also answer. But the question is, what are the state and federal statutes that will protect the box and property from violations?
Okay, I'm not going to be able to remember the statute numbers, so anyone who wants to ask about this, we can definitely provide details in writing later. But mosquito control in Florida is protected by Florida statutes, and as far as I'm aware, any mosquito control activity, whether that's monitoring, whether that's spraying, whether that's any kind of experimental project like this one or previous projects that have happened, those are all protected by mosquito control law in the state of Florida. So penalties for that, I think, I'm just trying to remember here, I think on a conviction that can be a second-degree misdemeanor, but I'd want to look up the details and make sure we can provide that to anyone who's interested. So, Andrew, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I agree. I think let's look up the specific statute numbers and provide that information. I know that is something that we've seen in mosquito control, that we are protected under Florida statute as far as our operations, and anyone that hampers those operations can be subject to misdemeanor charges. But also, again, these boxes are going to be placed on private property of willing citizens. So there are also property rights that will come into play as well.
Great. Thank you both. So this is the end of our questions, and we've reached the end of the webinar. And we just want to thank you all. And we will have this recording, our materials, and also the Q&A posted to our keysmosquitoproject.com site and oxytec.com/Florida. But thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have happy holidays and hope to see you again next month. Thank you.
Thank you.